The Cleveland Browns just requested an interview with a 30-year-old who's never called plays, never been a head coach, and has only 6 years of coaching experience total. And he might actually get the job. Grant Udinski, the Jacksonville Jaguars offensive coordinator who just turned 30, is now a serious candidate to become the next head coach of the Cleveland Browns. If he gets hired, he'll be the youngest head coach in NFL history, younger than SEAN MCVAY when he took over the Rams at 30 years and 353 days. And here's the crazy part. This could be exactly what Shedeur Sanders needs, because Udinsky has a reputation for developing quarterbacks, building explosive offenses, and turning struggling passers into Pro Bowl caliber players. Trevor Lawrence just had his best season in years under Udinsky. Sam Darnold resurrected his career working with him in Minnesota, and now the Browns are betting that this young offensive genius could do the same for Shedeur Sanders. This is either the most brilliant move Cleveland has made in years or another disaster waiting to happen. Hit that subscribe button right now because this story is about to blow your mind. January 12th, 2026. NFL Network insider Tom Pelissero broke the news that sent shockwaves through the football world. The Cleveland Browns had officially requested permission to interview Jacksonville Jaguars offensive coordinator Grant Udinski for their head coaching vacancy. Udinsky, who just turned 30 years old the same day, was now in the running to become the youngest head coach in NFL history. And the Browns weren't just kicking the tires. Multiple insiders reported that Cleveland was seriously considering hiring him. The Browns requested to interview Jaguars OC Grant Udinski for their head coach job, Pelissero tweeted. Just 30 years old, Udinsky has risen rapidly through the coaching ranks, now his first look for a head coach job. And within hours, the story exploded. Browns fans were split. Some were excited about the idea of a young, innovative offensive mind taking over the team. Others were terrified that the Browns were about to hire a coordinator who's never called plays and has zero head coaching experience. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a courtesy interview. The Browns were serious about Grant Udinski. So who is Grant Udinski, and why are the Browns so interested in a 30-year-old offensive coordinator who's only been in the NFL for 6 years? Let's start from the beginning. Udinsky was a defensive end in college, playing 1 season at Davidson before transferring to Towson University. He went undrafted in the 1919 NFL draft and immediately knew his playing career was over. So instead of trying to latch on to a practice squad, he decided to become a coach. And his journey from undrafted defensive end to NFL head coaching candidate is one of the most inspiring stories in football. In January 2019, Udinsky traveled to the American Football Coaches Association convention in San Antonio. He sat in the host hotel and introduced himself to every coach he could recognize, many of whom he had already emailed about potential coaching opportunities. One of those coaches was Jeff Nixon, the co-offensive coordinator and running backs coach at Baylor University under head coach Matt Rhule. Nixon told Udinsky there wasn't a graduate assistant position available at Baylor, but he invited him to watch practices and sit in on meetings during spring practice. Rhule then instructed Udinsky to apply to grad school. Less than a month later, Baylor had a graduate assistant spot open up, and Udinsky grabbed it. And according to multiple reports, Udinsky was so determined to make it as a coach that he slept in his car after landing that graduate assistant job because he couldn't afford housing. He was all in. He sacrificed everything to chase his dream of coaching in the NFL. And it worked. After 1 season at Baylor in 2019, Udinsky landed a job with the Carolina Panthers as a coaching assistant. He spent 2 seasons in Carolina, working under offensive coordinator Joe Brady, who's now the Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator and also a head coaching candidate this cycle. In 2022, Udinsky got his big break. Kevin O'Connell, the former Los Angeles Rams offensive coordinator who just became the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, hired Udinsky as his assistant to the head coach for special projects. O'Connell saw something in Udinsky, a brilliant football mind, a tireless work ethic, and an ability to connect with players. And over the next 3 years, Udinsky climbed the ladder in Minnesota. He became the assistant quarterbacks coach in 2023, then the assistant offensive coordinator and assistant quarterbacks coach in 2024.
And along the way, he worked closely with Sam Darnold, the former first-round bust who resurrected his career in Minnesota and signed a massive contract with the Atlanta Falcons in 2025. Kevin O'Connell recently praised Udinsky in an interview, saying, "Interviewing Grant was like interviewing a guy who could build a car from scratch for a job at a car wash." It was a fascinating quote. O'Connell was saying that Udinsky is overqualified for most positions. He's a savant, a football genius, the kind of guy who can break down film, design plays, and teach quarterbacks at an elite level. And when Liam Cohn became the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2025, he immediately hired Udinsky as his offensive coordinator. Now, here's where things get interesting. Udinsky was the offensive coordinator for the Jaguars in 2025, but he didn't call plays. Liam Cohn, the head coach, handled the play-calling duties. So what did Udinsky do? He worked directly with quarterback Trevor Lawrence on game planning, film study, and in-game adjustments. He was essentially Lawrence's quarterback coach, but with the title of offensive coordinator. And the results were stunning. The Jacksonville Jaguars went 13-4 in 2025 and won the AFC South. They finished 6th in the NFL in scoring, averaging 27.9 points per game. They ranked 11th in total offense, averaging 337.3 yards per game. And Trevor Lawrence had the best season of his career. He threw for over 4,200 yards, 31 touchdowns, and just 9 interceptions. He completed 66% of his passes and posted a passer rating over 100. He made the Pro Bowl and led the Jaguars to the playoffs. And after the Jaguars' wildcard loss to the Buffalo Bills, Lawrence praised Udinsky in his post-game press conference. "He's helped a lot," Lawrence said. "He's really unique."
That's the word Lawrence used, unique, because Udinsky isn't like most coordinators. He's young, he's relatable, he speaks the same language as today's players. He understands analytics, social media, and how to connect with a generation of athletes who grew up differently than coaches from previous eras. And most importantly, he knows how to develop quarterbacks. Sam Darnold in Minnesota, Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville, both of them had career years working with Udinsky. And now, the Browns are betting that he can do the same for Shedeur Sanders. And this is where the story gets really interesting for Browns fans, because if the Browns hire Grant Udinski, Shedeur Sanders' future is secure. Why? Because Udinsky is an offensive-minded coach who specializes in quarterback development. He's not going to draft Sanders' replacement in the first round. He's not going to bring in a veteran free agent to compete with him. He's going to commit to Sanders, build an offense around his strengths, and give him every opportunity to succeed. Multiple insiders have reported that the Browns are prioritizing offensive-minded candidates who can work with Jim Schwartz, the elite defensive coordinator who has turned Cleveland's defense into one of the best units in football. ESPN's Jordan Schultz explained it perfectly. The Browns would love to keep DC Jim Schwartz with their new head coach, given all the defensive success they've had, which is why most expect them to hire an offensive-minded head coach. Many around the league have viewed the Browns as a team who could hire a head coach who might be a year away from being a legitimate candidate, but in their eyes, if he's going to be a head coach in the future, why wait? That's why you are seeing Cleveland interview requests for Bengals OC Dan Pitcher, Jaguars OC Grant Udinski, and Rams pass game coordinator Nate Scheelhaase. Pairing a young offensive mind with Schwartz is deemed intriguing. So, the Browns are looking for a young offensive guru who can pair with Schwartz and maximize Shedeur Sanders' potential, and Udinsky checks every box. He's young, he's innovative, he's a quarterback developer, and he's hungry to prove himself as a head coach. But here's the risk. Udinsky has never been a head coach at any level, not in college, not in the NFL, not even in high school. He's 30 years old and only has 6 years of coaching experience, and the Browns are considering handing him the keys to a franchise that just went 5-12 and is desperate to turn things around. Cleveland sports radio host Ken Carman made a fascinating argument for why Udinsky might be the perfect hire. "Here we are. You got a 30-year-old young man out there," Carman said on 92.3 The Fan. I think what a guy like Udinsky does is he buys more time. If you're only going to win 5 or 6 games, you will have more time because you're going to go, he's 30 years old. Let's let him grow into the position. If you're going to win 5 or 6 games with Mike McDaniel, you're going to go, what are we doing here? Carmen's point is simple. If the Browns hire an experienced coach like Mike McDaniel or Todd Monken and the team struggles, ownership will fire them immediately. But if they hire a 30-year-old first-time head coach like Udinsky and the team struggles, ownership will give him more time to develop. It's a patience play, a long-term investment. And for Shedeur Sanders, that could be the difference between getting a real shot to develop or being replaced after one bad season.
But there's another parallel here that Browns fans need to understand, because the last time the Browns hired a young, offensive-minded head coach with no prior head coaching experience, it was Kevin Stefanski. Stefanski was 37 years old when he was hired in January 2020. He had spent his entire career with the Minnesota Vikings, working his way up from assistant to offensive coordinator. And in his first 2 seasons with the Browns, Stefanski went to the playoffs twice and won 2 Coach of the Year awards. But over the next 4 seasons, the team went 23-40, and he was fired on January 6, 2026. So the Stefanski experiment started well, but ended in disaster. Now the Browns are potentially doing it again. They're hiring another young offensive mind from the Minnesota Vikings coaching tree, Grant Udinski, and hoping for a different result. And Browns fans are understandably skeptical. But there's one major difference between Stefanski and Udinsky. Stefanski was handed Deshaun Watson, a broken $230 million quarterback who destroyed the franchise. Udinsky would be handed Shedeur Sanders, a 23-year-old rookie with upside and potential. The situations aren't the same, and if the Browns surround Udinsky with the right support, a strong offensive line, elite weapons, and a stable front office, he might actually succeed. General Manager Andrew Berry addressed the possibility of hiring a young, first-time head coach during his press conference on January 6th. "We'll be pretty open-minded," Berry said. "I think there are a number of different archetypes of successful head coaches. I think about Kevin. I think it's easy to forget now that he has 2 Coach of the Year awards on his mantle. When he was interviewed first in 2019 and he didn't get the job, and then again in 2020 and he did. In both of those cycles, he had no head coaching experience, and we were the only team that interviewed him. And so I think our responsibility is to search far and wide. There are good coaches out there. We've just got to do our homework and find the right fit for us." Berry is saying that the Browns aren't afraid to take a risk on an unknown. They did it with Stefanski. They could do it again with Udinsky. And if Udinsky becomes the next SEAN MCVAY, a young offensive genius who transforms a struggling franchise into a playoff contender, the Browns will look brilliant. But if he fails, Cleveland will be right back where they started, searching for head coach number 12 since 1999. Now let's talk about what Udinsky would mean for the Browns roster. If he gets the job, multiple analysts believe the Browns would double down on offense in the 2026 NFL Draft. The Browns currently hold the number 6 and number 24 overall picks in the first round, and according to Dogs by Nature, a Udinsky hire would make it inevitable that the Browns draft 2 offensive players in round 1. The most logical path? Draft a wide receiver at number 6 overall, potentially Ohio State's Carnell Tate, who posted a 151.8 passer rating when targeted in 2025, per Pro Football Focus. Then either draft another skilled position player or an offensive lineman at number 24. The goal would be to surround Shedeur Sanders with elite weapons and give Udinsky the pieces he needs to run a modern, explosive offense. And if the Browns execute that plan, Sanders could thrive. But here's the catch. The Browns still have Deshaun Watson on the roster. Watson is owed $46 million guaranteed in 2026, and his cap hit is over $80 million. Cutting him would result in a $131 million dead cap charge, which is financially impossible.
So Watson is staying. And if Udinsky gets the job, he'll have to navigate the Watson situation while developing Shedeur Sanders. It's a nightmare scenario that every Browns head coaching candidate will have to deal with. And how Udinsky handles it could determine whether he succeeds or fails. As of January 17, 2026, the Browns have interviewed 9 candidates for the head coaching job: Jim Schwartz, Tommy Rees, Aiden Durde, Dan Pitcher, Todd Monken, Mike McDaniel, and several others. They've requested interviews with Jesse Minter, Nate Scheelhaus, and Grant Udinski, and according to multiple reports, the Browns are still hoping to interview John Harbaugh, the former Ravens head coach, who is now a free agent. But Harbaugh is reportedly finalizing a deal with the New York Giants, which would take him off the board. So the Browns are running out of big-name candidates, and that's exactly why Grant Udinski is gaining momentum. He's the wild card, the unknown, the high-risk, high-reward gamble that could either save the franchise or set it back another 5 years. And for Shedeur Sanders, Udinsky might be his best hope. Because if the Browns hire a defensive-minded coach like Jim Schwartz or Aiden Durde, Sanders could be benched for Deshaun Watson or replaced in the draft. But if they hire Udinsky, Sanders gets a real shot, a quarterback developer, an offensive genius, a coach who believes in building around young talent. The next few weeks will determine everything. The Browns are conducting interviews, they're evaluating candidates, and somewhere in Jacksonville, Grant Udinski is preparing for the biggest interview of his life. If he lands this job, he'll be the youngest head coach in NFL history. He'll be tasked with fixing a broken offense, developing a rookie quarterback, and turning around a franchise that's been stuck in misery for 26 years. But if he succeeds, he'll become a legend, and Shedeur Sanders could be the quarterback who helps him get there. This is the story of Grant Udinski, a 30-year-old who slept in his car to chase his dream, who climbed from graduate assistant to offensive coordinator in 6 years, who developed Sam Darnold and Trevor Lawrence into Pro Bowl caliber quarterbacks, and who might be one interview away from becoming the next great head coach in the NFL. The Browns are about to find out if he's ready. This story is based on reports from ESPN, NFL Network, Heavy.com, and Cleveland.com as of January 2026. The Browns' coaching search is ongoing, and new developments may emerge as interviews continue.